Hey, and welcome. Welcome to another episode of KDM. Stands for Kit Dimitri Movies. Hey, I'm Dimitri Panos of the Cinescope, along with my great friend, colleague, and awesome co-host, Kit Bowen of the
Hi.
Movie Kit. Hey, Kit, what's up?
I'm good. How are you?
Just watching movies. And enjoying what I've been seeing this summer so far. Actually, this year has been a surprise. So,
Yeah,
yeah. So
I,
today we have something. I'm sorry, say that again, please.
I agree. The movies are starting to get better.
Yeah, this has been one of the best summers, I think, for movies in a long time. I think a lot of movies, including the one we're going to talk about in just a minute, I think a lot of the movies, at least for me, that have come out this year and this summer have actually delivered. Some were turned out to be some pleasant surprises.
Yep.
And you can't ask for anything more. I mean, you can, but Hollywood never listens. But it's been a fun summer at the movies.
Yeah, it really
So,
has. Yeah, especially this
yeah,
we're going to talk about.
especially this movie, which we're going to talk about, which is Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Part 1.
Part one.
So Kit, why don't you start us off, please?
Okay.
I always defer to you. It's always ladies first, and
I know.
you're a lady. And yeah, I just think it's the smart play, and I always love to start it off with you because you're far more jubilant and
No,
bubblier than me.
and you know what? You're great too because you add in as much enthusiasm, but then you also have a lot of like details sometimes that I forget, and then you mention those. I'm like, oh yeah.
That's why we're doing this show together. Again, as a reminder, you've tuned into KDM, which stands for Kit Dimitri Movies with an exclamation point at the end. So,
Yes, our new review show. So,
mm,
yes, Mission Impossible. Well, I have loved these movies from the beginning. They have always delivered for me. There has, maybe there was a few kind of minor missteps. I thought the third one was no, okay, but it like in comparison to say like the Fast and Furious, which they had me all the way up to that last one where they went to space, and then I was like, that's it.
blah.
You jumped the
you,
shark. Mission
you blew
Impossible
it.
has not jumped the shark, and this one absolutely delivers. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. We got a chance to see it together, and that was fun. I think I grabbed your arm a few times, but Tom,
I love that we can go to movies together like this, and hopefully we could start doing it more. I think it's a lot of fun, and we can get our reaction just like this. And you're right, you did.
I did. I just Tom Cruise is look, he is the movies. He's like the main action movie star, in my opinion. He and maybe Keanu Reeves, I don't know. But, this is his niche. This is what he does the best. And I think for me, as opposed to maybe even Top Gun, which of course, many people credited him for bringing people back to the movies last year after a very long stretch of not being able to go see movies, and then the movies not being so great, and Tom Cruise delivered Top Gun Maverick, and it was fantastic. But anyway, I particularly love him as Ethan Hunt. I just, this character is just so great, and the whole idea behind the IMF, which is the Impossible Mission Force that
Wait,
he
that exists?
that was the best scene. There's a scene where,
And by the ways,
give too much
pardon my
away.
interruption. We should throw in there. This is going to be a spoiler review.
Yeah.
We will put this in our notes when we send it out. But this is going to be a spoiler review. So if you have not watched the movie, please do so. Please come back so that you'll have a good comparison. If you don't mind spoilers, by all means, please sit through. But this is going to have some spoilers. So we're warning you ahead of time.
Right. So, yes, there was a scene in which it looked like some, higher up intelligent mucky mucks from the US government are gathered together to talk about what this latest villain, which happens to be AI for this one, which makes sense, very relevant to what's happening in the world.
Extraordinarily relevant today. Yeah.
Yes, today. So they're discussing it, and then the guy who sort of is their liaison, played by oh shoot, now I'm blanking on his name, and I love this actor. Henry
Issa Morales, or Henry shows. Yep.
Yep. Canadian
He's in, we should know, he was in the original Mission Impossible movie, directed by Brian De Palma.
Right. That's right. And then of course Alec Baldwin sort of was their liaison for the last few, but he got killed off. So anyway, explaining what IMF is, just the reaction to the people in this room was just very funny. Anyway, it was just nonstop. And like I said, AI is sort of the villain in this situation, and we won't get too much into how it comes about, because that is sort of hard to explain. And by the way, you should probably just experience what happens so that you can get a clue in of us trying to tell you what goes on. But just suffice to say, it is AI, and there's this key that they have to
and it's a cool looking key too.
Yeah,
it's a two-part. There was a special name like Crucifixus key or something, but you could almost wear it as a pennant.
Yeah,
it was a cool looking key.
So you've got two halves of this key that are separated, and they're trying to bring them. So you got that could actually, I suppose, shut down whatever this AI thing is. And so Ethan wants to get it to shut it down, and you can talk about Isai Morales, who is one of your favorite characters in this. He sort of plays a mysterious villain. He's a villain past, and he's apparently working with the
Gabriel.
AI. So anyway, just on the edge. And some of my faves who were, you have some of the returning characters, of course, Ving Rhames and Simon Pegg and Rebecca Ferguson, who's definitely one of my faves of this series as well. From Rogue Nation, when she was introduced, she was just so badass. Also, Vanessa Kirby, I love her too. She's the daughter of the original, whoever she is, like a broker. I don't know what she. I'm not.
Yeah, she was like a dealer of information and codes, and she goes all the way back to. She was played by a famous actress.
Yeah, Vanessa Redgrave, but this is her daughter. Redgrave.
Right, and but the character goes all the way back to Mission Impossible, the first one.
Right.
Yeah.
And Haley Atwell is a new addition to this, and she was fantastic. She fit right in. I think I mentioned to you that I've always loved her as well, and I felt like she kind of got the raw deal on the whole Peggy Carter thing. That show didn't really take off, but she was still such a great part of the Marvel the Avengers storyline. But yeah, she plays sort of a master thief who kind of gets into this whole mission impossible,
right.
mission impossible,
right.
But really, for the two of us, it just absolutely goes off the rails, figuratively and literally, at the last 40 minutes of the film, with this entire train sequence that was just, it was like, heart racing, grabbing of the arms, going, climb. I was so thrilled by it. And I feel like the action in these movies, you always have your big stunt that he does. I guess now that's sort of
ever since I think McQuarrie has taken it. Well,
go
ahead. We'll talk. Well, the action sequences, Brian De Palma has his style, and he did a really good job. And then John Woo directed part 2, and we did know that Tom Cruise did a lot of his own stunts. He in fact wanted to work with John Woo, so he did a lot of his own stunts in the motorcycle and the fight scenes. But then there was part 3, the one that was directed by Lost and Star Trek.
J.J. Abrams, right?
J.J. Abrams, and it was that one for sure that really started a lot of, especially if you have the Blu-ray.
Right.
They're really focused in how Tom Cruise does a lot of his stunts. The following movie, the fourth, was Brad Bird, and again some pretty decent high level stunts. Again, very much focusing on Tom Cruise doing a lot of these stunts. But then it was with Christopher McQuarrie in Rogue Nation that they really put the spotlight on Cruise. Rogue Nation was the one I recently saw. It was the one where he's hanging from the plane.
Yep.
Right. And there was a detailed breakdown that both of them did this at CinemaCon. I believe there's something also on the Blu-ray if you have it. And then they really educated the audiences to say, this is Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is doing all of this. And every movie thereafter, up until this one, it's focused on whether he's doing a halo jump or flying a helicopter or riding a motorcycle off a mountain. People say it's a cliff, and I'm like, no, that's a mountain.
That's a mountain. Yeah. And that's the other thing. I mean, yes, the stunts for him have they're very elaborate. I probably besides the plane one, which was, and it always somehow involves Simon Pegg. Right?
Oh, yeah. Except for the halo jump.
With the plane one, it was
with the plane one, yes. He was
like, where is Ethan? Where's Ethan? Yeah. Can't find Ethan, and all of a sudden they see him hanging off the plane. Oh, there he is. Oh,
he's hanging on a plane. You need to open the door, not that door.
So yeah. I think that has become part of the repertoire of these films, when Simon Pegg's character is introduced. And then in this one, again, there's even more comedy. I felt like it was even funnier than any of the other ones. There were some definitely laugh out loud moments, including the one where he's on top of this mountain and he's like, okay, where's the train? Simon's like, well, it's down there. Do you see it?
Yeah, she'll be coming around the corner. Well, yeah, I see the train.
You gotta jump on it.
Yeah, you gotta jump on it. What?
He's like, what? Even for Tom Cruise's it's like, as Ethan, he's like, are you crazy? I can't do it. So of course he does do it. But yeah, it was thrilling from start to finish. And it kind of wraps up in a way. So it is a part one, because they didn't necessarily, go to the fruition of finding the villain and dismantling it or whatever. But it gets to a point where we now see where it's going to go next.
Right.
But the storyline itself kind of wrapped up in a nice way, I thought. So, but leaving you wanting more, obviously.
Yeah.
So yeah, I loved it. Go ahead. You can now talk.
No. I mean, I love the rapport and I love the banner. For me, this Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, part one, it really delivers one of the summer's best, if not the year's best, action movies. Period. And it fills every bit of the big screen with lush locales and beautifully cut. It has a great pace to it. And it is like a runaway locomotive train whose brakes are cut on the track, and it leaves in each set piece. You talked about the set pieces. I felt in this particular installment, each set piece was building. Like every set piece, I believe starting off at the airport, going into that nightclub, and then everything. Oh, the car chase, which we'll talk about. Everything is fantastic and great, but each one builds upon the other until we get to the final act. And this is part one. And I'm like, well, how is part two gonna pick up? I'm exhausted, and the only thing I felt impossible was to keep my heart rate down. I needed the 35-minute car ride home to do that, and all the while I'm thinking about this movie. It's incredible. You brought something up. It's been 27 years since that first Mission Impossible movie, and there's one more in the wings that we're aware of, and there really hasn't been. There's not one that I can point to that's like a clunker, right?
Yeah.
We could have our favorites and stuff, but I can't point to one and say that movie it stinks. I can't do it in this series. And when it's an action series that's so hard to do, and I feel that it succeeds where, look, I'm just gonna say it. These movies, this series, look far better than anything I've seen in John Wick. And I think for
Well,
me,
I feel
well,
I feel like the John Wick movies. I mean, I feel like they both can exist in the same universe.
they can, but to me, John Wick is far too repetitive. It's the same thing. It's a fight, fight, fight.
Yeah, I can.
Two in the chest, one in the head. Fight, fight, fight. And then the fights just get longer. The stunts are fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but it gets rather drawn out, and I get tired. And not like Mission Impossible. Like I'm tired from Mission Impossible because I'm so on edge. And when it's over, I'm like, I can breathe again.
Yeah.
John Wick, I just get like, okay, all right. Oh, we've got to watch him hit every step on the way down as he rolls down the step. I'm like, let's move on. But these movies,
You're right. You're right. I have to agree with you on that.
Yeah, these
Even though I
movies,
love the fight sequences in John Wick, it does get a little the same. And the Fast and Furious is exactly the same. So
right?
competitive, you know. But while Mission Impossible, they literally give you a story. They give you, you know, while building relationships and building these characters, you know, that can have a far-reaching arc. The movies themselves, it's a mission, and they've got to do it, and it's always, you know, it's always different way, right?
100%, 100%. But I think a lot of that goes to Christopher McQuarrie and company,
Yeah,
and Tom Cruise. You know, you've probably heard this saying a lot. When you see interviews with other directors or actors like Martin Scorsese or Steven Spielberg, and there are certain people that you hear the term, "Oh, yeah, I was on set, and these two have a shorthand." Like they know what to, you know. It's just they work so well together, and in this sense, I feel that Tom Cruise and Christopher McQuarrie work really great together. That they have their own shorthand, and Christopher McQuarrie can trust in Tom Cruise to go for it and do what he can for the production, where Christopher McQuarrie himself will do anything that he can to not be repetitive, to do something that is integral to the story, and not just for the sake of having him jump off a mountaintop, off a motorcycle. And the two of them know their limitations, which there doesn't seem to be any, but they know what to give each other. And I think that in this series, and even in the first Jack Reacher movie, which had some great fight scenes and another fantastic car chase, that they just work really well together. And in this movie, the other thing that Christopher McQuarrie does great is he brings puzzle pieces together. By puzzle pieces, I mean characters, because the characters don't all have to be together.
right.
But he has a great way of bringing them together, or like the airport sequence, right? The airport sequence in this movie, there are characters who are like trying to guide Ethan and whatnot and do this, and there's another character over here and here. And McQuarrie knows how to bring everything together so that you as the audience, you don't get confused as to what you're watching. And you ever read like a fast-paced book? It was like a Tom Clancy, or even like the Harry Potter, when you end a chapter and the chapter ends in a cliffhanger, and then you go to something else. That's what McQuarrie and Cruise deliver. They have characters over here, but how are we going to get them to over here? Because these characters are doing something here. He's fantastic at bringing these pieces of the puzzle, or his characters, together, even though that they're separate in a scene. And I love that. And they rely on strong writing with a smooth editing. So an audience is never confused as
Yeah,
to where they are,
exactly.
you know?
Exactly. Well, you know, I love to tell the story that I just watched recently.
Yeah.
Matt Damon was on this. It was called Smartless. It's a podcast show that Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, and Sean Hayes did, and they did like an HBO documentary following on the road. And Matt Damon was a guest on the podcast at one point. And he just tells the story about sitting down with Tom Cruise one time for dinner, and he's like, "So Tom, I mean, how that the one where he's on the building, running around the building. I think that was Ghost Protocol, where he's
Yeah, blue is
alive."
glue, red is dead. Yes, with those special gloves.
Yes, and
Simon Pegg.
yeah, and he Matt Damon just immediately launches into a pretty good Tom Cruise impersonation, and he goes, "So I'll tell you how we did this. So I laid out the whole stunt, and I went to the safety officer, and I said, okay, this is what I want to do, blah blah blah." And the safety officer says, "Well, Tom, I'm not sure we'll be able to do that or this or whatever the case may be," and like kind of shut him down. And then then Matt says, and then Tom said, "So I got a new safety officer, and so you're pretty sure you can't say no to Tom if he thinks he can do it, you know." But it's like
Yeah,
it's like we talked about last time on for our Indiana Jones review.
yeah.
Harrison Ford set that precedent. Harrison Ford was the
I mean, it can go as far back as Errol Flynn. It can go as far back as Clint Eastwood as Dirty Harry. There's he did a lot of his stunts. He if you're familiar with Dirty Harry, there's a scene where the Zodiac killer has hijacked a school bus full of kids, and Harry's after him, and the school bus is going underneath a bridge, and
Yeah.
Harry's on and that's Clint Eastwood literally jumping off the bridge onto said bus. And then, of course, Harrison Ford, yes, and in the 80s, to see something like that, to see Harrison Ford being dragged by a truck, no less, but it offers, or like, obviously, a realism. It amps up the excitement, and Tom Cruise has likened himself just recently, in fact, to Harrison Ford with the release of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. He said, "I want to be making movies. I will make these movies until I'm 80, just like Harrison Ford." And you know what? I believe him.
I do too.
I really believe him.
He can, for sure.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's yeah. He provides a lot of thrills. But here's the thing about Tom Cruise that I've always said, I feel like he's a good actor. He really hasn't given himself, he's kind of more he's concentrated more on these action films. But I felt in Top Gun Maverick, he really turned in a great performance.
He is a great actor.
He is.
Let us not forget that the man has been nominated for Best Actor. And the times have sadly changed. And, Tom Cruise knows what sells. And unfortunately, we're not in a movie making world where studios want to put a star in an original piece and content. They would rather churn out these IPs. And so it's hard for original content to thrive as it did in the 80s. But when you look at his performance in Rain Man, when you look at his performance in The Color of Money, when you look at his performance in Risky Business, right?
Or Magnolia. Oh my God.
Well, yeah, Magnolia, not my favorite movie, but or how about that performance? And then he's like barely recognizable in Tropic Thunder.
Oh, I love good for Tom doing that.
Right, but those days, like, we're not going to see him in like a Magnolia. Say that again.
You don't think he'll do something later, like a little indie movie or something? You don't think he might do it again?
I think that personally, I mean, listen, I'm not in the man's head. Personally, I think those days are over. I think of recently, there was a lesson learned with The Mummy. And if you remember, The Mummy was supposed to launch a whole new, launch a whole new division at Universal, which Blumhouse now has kind of done, and that failed miserably. And there was a lot of, like you heard, there was a lot of stories about the making of that movie. And I think after that, he's just like, nah. I mean, he's worked with, he's done Edge of Tomorrow, which is
That was
great. He
great.
works, and there's another director that gets him is Doug Liman.
Yes.
And he did do that little, it's not an indie movie, but the one where it was based off a real life pilot who was shipping drugs.
Oh, yes, yes, that was good.
That was also Doug Liman.
Yeah.
He works really well with them, and there was supposed to be a sequel to Edge of Tomorrow, which they had hoped it would have done better at the box office, but I think it really found its life vis-a-vis cable, video, all that stuff. And I think with this particular movie, when you talked about AI, let's think about this for a second. So the movie had to have been written at the very least 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. So they started production on Dead Reckoning and I believe Dead Reckoning 2, because they're filming back to back at around 2019, towards the end of 2019. And then the world shut down. So they had already had a script. Right. And McQuarrie with Eric Jenderson, I'm telling you, they must have had a crystal ball, or it's just a great happy accident, because back in 2019, AI, look, we've seen AI movies, including the movie AI, but of course, James Cameron explored it with the Terminator, things like that. So it's always been a science fiction trope, and we're getting another movie directed by Gareth Edwards that's about AI. But this movie is really more rooted into what a lot of people are talking about today. Yeah. So it was either a happy accident or they had a crystal ball. And I think for them, it was a happy accident, because now that this movie is coming out, it's far more relevant today than had it been released when it was originally planned, which I think was to be 2021. So,
right. And COVID.
Right. Yeah. So I think that that's fantastic. There was one actress, like, yes, the cast is great. I'm glad that the gang is back together.
Yes.
And it really is fun to see them. There is an omission that I felt, and that was Jeremy Renner's character isn't in this movie, which is weird, because he was literally from Rogue Nation. And I think even though from the one before, he's been in 3 of these movies, 4 of these movies, and he's a great character. He's developed into, he was a really solid character in Rogue Nation. Right. He was great.
Ghost Protocol, I think, was that was when he was kind of introduced to the.
Yeah, and it's for me anyways, it was noticeably he wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh. Well, maybe
but
then part 2, right? There's a part 2. We know there's a part 2 to this. So,
yeah,
maybe he'll show up there. But we also have to mention Palm.
Oh yeah.
Palm. Hold on. Palm.
Yeah, I never know.
No. Palm Clementieff.
That's it. Okay, Clementieff.
Palm Clementieff.
Got it.
She plays a henchwoman to Gabriel. Gabriel is under the employ of AI, and they need to get they're trying to get both pieces of the key. She is his hatchet woman, so to speak, the henchwoman. I thought as an action person, I thought that she too was fantastic. She has a great arc as well, and I love to see actors out of the element that's made them like extraordinarily famous, especially if that role is a superhero role. Yeah. And as Mantis, it was really great to see her in this kind of action role, and it makes me want to see her in her own kind of action movie, kind of like a Charlize Theron.
So to speak. Agree. She was really badass in this. I mean, that's the thing about these actresses that he gets in these movies, Tom, that he casts. They're all like really, really interesting and unique and just badass women. I mean, like I said, Rebecca Ferguson was my favorite. Although Michelle Monaghan, even though, you know, the third one, she really wasn't an action person, but you know, she kind of ended up having to be, and she was great.
She
And
was fantastic. Yeah.
who am I thinking? Well,
You had well,
Vanessa
well,
Kirby,
yeah, yeah, and
oh,
you had
what was the
Sandy
one in,
Newton. Sandy
right?
Newton was
Annie
in the
Newton.
John Woo one.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then
So
the Ghost Protocol, was that
uh, um
what's her name?
Patterson is, you had Maggie Q
Maggie
was
Q.
in one, and then you had Pattinson, the woman that was married to the to Robin Thicke's son. She was in the one with the one with the Dubai building. She was really good with the action as well. I don't have
That was
IMDb.
Maggie May. Or Maggie.
Maggie Q. Maggie Q was in part 3. She was in part
Oh,
3.
okay.
Yeah, because when they're going into that Vatican party or something, and she's like, "Do we have to blow up the car?"
Oh, right.
You know, and yeah, she was fantastic. But Rebecca Ferguson, I think, has been great
Yes.
in this series. One thing too that I think that a lot of the Mission Impossibles, and I, you know, I believe it to be Christopher McQuarrie, although I've never heard it in an interview, or maybe I've just missed it. Maybe you've picked up on it. You know, they take their cues, I feel, from some James Bond movies, you know, particularly the globetrotting.
Yes.
You know, it's like a spy movie. They're trying to do something, that there's a mission like James Bond has. And this movie, I feel that there are direct parallels to For Your Eyes Only.
Right.
Because, you know, the movie For Your Eyes Only was also about obtaining a doodad that was sunk in a submarine, and whoever gets hold of this doodad controls like all the missiles and can turn missiles against each other, things like that. So James Bond has to get this. Great locales, but there's a fantastic car chase in that movie, but it's a non-Bond car chase because he's in a Citroen, or he's in a, at the time it was called The Thing. It's yellow. This movie has a great car chase with a yellow Fiat,
Right.
not your normal Ethan Hunt
Yes.
car.
No,
it's not a muscle car.
Together, I thought, oh, that was great.
Oh, I loved it. And again, they're in a Fiat in Paris, Palm.
It's Rome. They're in Rome. Rome.
Yeah, and no, her name is Paris, I believe.
Oh, right.
The character's name, and she's in like a Humvee, like a tank chasing a little yellow Fiat. So again, to your point, there was some really good humor in this movie. You know, from an action standpoint, again, everything just ramps up, and it really gets you from the get-go. And they create a villain that it literally stakes are raised. And that's another thing this franchise has done in one way, shape, or form. It has raised the stakes, and the villains are always nasty. And this one, yeah, Gabriel is still cold and calculating, and he's as calculating as a professional Texas Hold'em poker player, because he uses that kind of like logic to figure out outcomes. And you know, he offers characters, you could do this, but it's going to end this way. You could do this, it's going to end this way. Everything up to that last act on that train is stuff that you've never seen before. And at the same time, I think McQuarrie, maybe knowing that we're heading to the end, like, yeah, there are like little nods to other action sequences he's done, but Tom Cruise has been fantastic. The stunt that you know, I think we can both agree, telling the audience, the stunt that they've been highlighting, whoa, Nelly, like, oh boy, howdy, it is like what you see in the trailer and on TV, not even close to the full ongoing stunt. So
yes, it is.
It's gorgeous.
And you think you're done. You think you're done. You think, oh, okay, so they got this to this part, and you're like, oh no, wait, no, wait,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
gonna. They still have to do this before they're safe. You're like, oh my god, yeah, that was
It-
one of the most intense grabbing the seat arms of the people next to you I've had in
Right.
a long time. Long time.
Yeah, and that is one of the reasons why I find this summer to be fantastic. We got to see I saw two movies in the same week, one of them being Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I don't care that I'm in the minority because I gave that the high five, but I easily can give Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 the high five is
High
5.
five.
I mean, high five, baby. I mean, it's that good. And I think
Really is.
that even I'll even go as far as saying that I think it'll or I should say over index at box office. I think the marketing has been great. And that's another thing when you have Tom Cruise on board, like he
So how much
promotes
do you
his
think
stuff.
this is gonna open with? I'd like to hear
I
your
think it'll do 6. I think they have it right now currently at around 90, but I think it'll do more. I think audiences are gonna not only are audiences gonna flock to it, but they're gonna try to get into the premium large format.
yeah.
AKA IMAX, ScreenX, Dolby, whatever. So they're going to pay the extra money. I think those shows this weekend are going to be the hard ones to get into. And I think people have been hearing and seeing enough of this trailer and marketing. I think they're very excited. And it's been a while due to the pandemic.
Yeah.
And audiences around the world love Tom Cruise.
Yep.
And they love to see him do the stunts.
Well, Dimitri, that reminds me, there is a podcast I think we're going to be doing very soon.
Yes.
Where we are going to talk about what the fate of a movie star is these days. Are there really stars anymore, or are they fading out?
Yes, I think it's a good topic.
Great...
I think we've talked about that Hollywood has lost its magic in creating movie stars, and Hollywood was, I mean, fantastic at creating its movie stars, Tom Cruise being one of them. Yeah. It's hard to call him a movie star today. He is, but he was a movie star back in the 80s. He was created, he was built up. Same goes for Schwarzenegger, who, a lot of these people, but Hollywood just doesn't do it anymore. But Tom Cruise, with exception of The Mummy, has proven that he can get butts and seats when he does the movies that he wants, that people want to see him in. And this movie will be no exception. I think it'll end up being the highest grossing Mission Impossible movie.
I think so too. I think it's definitely going to be a biggie. So definitely tune in to our Movie Star podcast, which we'll do pretty soon. But also we've got some great movies to talk about coming up. Oppenheimer, Barbie. It's going to be a great time. So thanks.
It's great. No, thank you, Kit. This is great. And thank you, audience, for tuning in. Hope you like it. Leave in the comments. And we'll be back soon with the next episode of KDM. Thank you. Bye.